My name is Ekant Veer, and I've been given the honor to kick off the What If Wednesday series for this year. And I was asked to talk about some of my research with health promotion, and the first thing I want to say at the What If Wednesday series is that I think the What If Wednesday name is a horrible name because it kind of restricts you into coming up with these what if questions, which doesn't really work with the sort of work I do. So we came up with this What If Health Promotions actually worked, and I don't think it's a great title. Some of the things that I might have been happier with if we didn't have to use the what if name was what if everyone in New Zealand knew what was healthy or unhealthy. That was very close to being it, but I think a better title might have been why is there an over-reliance on mass media and why is that hindering health promotion? I'm going to be talking a lot more today about how mass media is being used and perhaps overused as a primary means of trying to get people to do what is right, okay? And I say right because who are we to judge what is right or wrong, but we'll talk about that as time goes on. If you are here to get ammunition to tell us that we shouldn't be funding health promotion and that we should just be ignoring preventative health care and just fixing people while they're broken, I'm sorry, you're out of luck, okay? I'm going to be talking about how we can make health promotion better and how perhaps an over-reliance on mass media as the primary means of promoting health in New Zealand is actually hurting the sort of work that many of the people I know in this room are doing. So I see a few friendly faces who I know are working on the front lines, and sometimes the promotion that you see on TV or on billboards, whatever, doesn't always help. So we'll talk a little bit about that as time goes on. So the first thing I want to say, promotion that focuses primarily on mass education is cheap, measurable, scalable, relatively easy, and flawed. Education is a great way of getting people to know what is right and or wrong. It is a great way of teaching people this is what you should be doing, this is what you shouldn't be doing. It is very easy to try and push that out to a mass audience. It is very easy to do it on a large scale. It is relatively cheap because you can put together messages that can explain this is good for you, this is bad for you. The problem is, if everybody knew what was good for them and bad for them, doesn't mean they will naturally go on to do what is right for them or go on to do something that is better for them. Everybody knows what the speed limit is, you know, we kind of have an understanding of that. Yeah, I know that it's 50 Ks along certain roads and sometimes it's 100 Ks and we've got little signs to tell us. I am under no illusions what the speed limit is. I recently did a road trip around the South Island. I left the kids and the wife to go off and see the in-laws, and I went on a bit of a bachelor's road trip to Milford Sound. Great fun. Long roads down to Milford Sound. Sometimes you look at the speedo and go, wow, I'm doing 110. Better slow down now. Wow, I'm doing 110. You know what? There's no one around for 500 kilometers. I'm not going to slow down so much. Don't put that on camera. Just because we know what is right or wrong doesn't necessarily mean we do what is right, okay? So education can be there as a primary means to tell people or encourage people to learn what is right or wrong, but unfortunately that seems to be where a lot of health promotion in New Zealand is stopping. This is good for you, this is bad for you. It's very easy to measure if people know, because you can ask them, what do you think of this? Do you know the answer to this? Do you know that? And we can say, yes, I know exactly how many kilojoules I should be having every day. I know exactly what is right for me. I know exactly how to lose weight. It means expend more energy than I'm taking in. I know the theory. I have not lost weight, as you can see, okay? Just because we know what the way to do it is, doesn't necessarily mean we do it. And that's what I really want to talk about. Why can we not just turn education into behavior? It's not such an easy transition. So knowing something is good for you or bad for us is only a tiny part of a very complex nature of human behavior. It's only a tiny part of the whole equation that drives people to make a change for the better, hopefully. Now, we know this doesn't always work simply because there are many things in society that we're still trying to fix. We're still trying to help people quit smoking. We're still working with people who hate the idea of being told to quit, they need to quit smoking. I know people who, as soon as they heard that there's a chance that New Zealand might go smoke-free by 2025, they took up smoking, simply because they don't want to be told what the frick to do. You cannot tell me what to do, so I will do it to myself. Like, that's fantastic. That's a brilliant one. You will not be allowed to speed. Everyone ends up speeding and says, okay, you cannot go under the speed limit. Let's see what they do. No, it doesn't really work that way. Humans naturally end up doing stupid things, okay? And that's okay. I work in the marketing department here at the University of Canterbury, and I study people. I study people as part of my jobs, and people are naturally stupid. I don't get on with economists too well, simply because economists think everyone's rational, and people will do things to benefit and maximize their utility. No, some people do stupid things, and that's okay. I've been bungee jumping. I know stupid, okay? There is no rational reason to jump off a bridge and hopefully this little bungee cord that this guy behind me tied to my ankles while he's probably a little stoned is going to be safe. Doesn't make sense. But this seems to be, humans do things that naturally don't make sense. And a lot of the stuff that we're talking about, and a lot of the stuff I research are people who do things that don't make logical sense. That's okay. Trying to understand it is going to be part of the puzzle. So there's this over-reliance in my mind of trying to get the message out there. The government has limited budgets. The government does not have the sort of funds that many corporates do to promote things that are unhealthy. So to give you an idea, I think the approximation there is that the Cancer Society has about $20 million internationally to promote healthy behavior, skin, covering yourself up with sunscreen and things like that. I think Pepsi-Cola has a massive budget, something like $200 million just for Pepsi-Cola, not necessarily all the other products they have. You have all these other products, corporations out there that are spending massive budgets to promote things that are naturally not the best for us. However, we're trying to work in ways that we can try and prevent bad behavior, and we have fewer resources. So we have to try and make our money stretch as far as we can. And so there's this reliance on getting the message out there. Make sure everyone knows. It's very easy to do that because you can put it on a TV ad or something like that. Now, cynical people have always existed. There have always been cynical people. The only problem nowadays is that cynical people have a voice, and that voice can sometimes be heard. That's not a bad thing. I like cynical people. I'm quite cynical myself. The internet has afforded many people the opportunity to debate issues online, have afforded people the opportunity to write a blog or whatever they want, and people can come up with little arguments here, there, and everywhere. Great to encourage criticality in our society, amazing way to encourage people to start this discourse around certain things. The problem with that is that you have a lot of people who will give pushback against promotions we're trying to put out. So you guys all remember the sort of ad campaign that came out recently about speeding, and the two guys kind of stop and they get out and have a chat to each other, and, you know, I'm going too fast, I didn't realize, you know, blah, blah, blah. Very famous campaign, went viral on the internet, lots of people have seen it, lots of people on the internet were arguing the fallacies in that situation. Not just that they've stopped time and things like that, but the actual idea, well, if he's doing 105, nothing's going to stop him. You know, if 105 is not going to make a difference. The other guy's at fault. No, the other guy's at fault. Lots of people having this debate online, which kind of distracted from the message in the ad, which was that people make mistakes. Perhaps you should be aware of what other people do and maybe watch your speed. Just because you think you're a great driver doesn't mean other people are as good at driving. You know? And all that message kind of gets mixed around in the wash. So online debates about health promotion are kind of stifling the effects that a lot of these health promotion campaigns have. Everyone will have an opinion, perfectly fine. The problem is sometimes they will have this opinion, share it with others, and then we get this sort of cynical debate happening. And some people start to think, well, actually, I've kind of forgotten about the message in that ad and starting to think about something else. Now, this is not something that is prevalent with every health promotion campaign that is out there. However, it is something that you might face, okay? If you're putting a health promotion campaign out there, don't be surprised if people will argue its merits. And they will argue their merits with other people, and it will reach a wider audience. So when you have a mass campaign which reaches a mass audience, guess what? There'll be a lot more people who will be arguing its merits and the things wrong with it as well. And that has a trickle-down effect. I talk about this in my class on human behavior, and this is the Ottawa Charter, and it was made up of 5 components in 1986. We're looking a long time ago. 1986, and they looked at the different things that are needed in order to make health promotion effective. It is not just advertising. It is not just promotion in the marketing sense. It is a number of things. Starting at the top, building a healthy policy. They believed that health promotion has to start with healthy policy. There has to be some healthy policy out there, whether it's local or central government, whoever it might be. There must be some sort of regulation, because if there is regulation that promotes unhealthfulness in society, then guess what? People are going to be erring more towards unhealthfulness. There's developer personal skills. Make sure people have the individual skills necessary in order to make them as effective at affecting their own health as possible. If people don't have those personal skills, they don't have the knowledge, they don't have the ability, then nothing's going to change as part of this. Strengthen community actions. I'm a big fan of this one. This idea of not just looking at individuals, but looking at communities in general. Looking at how people work together. My PhD looked at how we can use advertising to encourage healthy levels of eating and exercise in very poor parts of New Zealand. We were in South Auckland, and we were looking at how advertising can help kids to make healthy choices. Have breakfast in the morning. Make sure you don't end up having a pie for morning tea, or something like that. We worked on that sort of things. Now, those are the areas where money is tight and community is massive. We didn't just work with the kids, because you can tell the kids one thing, they can be sold on that idea, but if mum and dad aren't bought in, if the community isn't bought in, if their aunties and uncles aren't bought in, then guess what? The kids are going to lose that message. So working with the community. Reorient health services is a larger area, which I don't really work so much in, but making sure that the health services surrounding a person who's trying to live a healthier life are suiting them. Make sure they have access to health services that are going to benefit them long term. And create supportive environments, again, not just with the community, but within the local environment, their family environment, whatever it might be, that people are there to support them. Now, if you go on the internet, those supportive environments don't always exist, okay? The internet has opened it up where you can find support on the internet. Fantastic. You can also find areas of the internet which are going to hinder your actions. They're going to help you backslide away from healthiness, okay? The internet in general is not going to help you lose weight. I know this. I'm online far too much. One of the problems since 1986 is that so much of the focus has ended up on this area of personal development, improving personal skills and developing personal skills, because that's an easy thing you can do. You can teach someone right or wrong. You can focus on what they should and shouldn't do, and if they don't do it, well, it's because they're morons, not because we did anything wrong. Okay? It's much easier to do this than it is to work with a whole community. It's much easier to do this than reorient a whole health service. Far easier, as we all know this year with a election year, to do this than to put in campaigns and policies that are going to make people's lives a little bit more difficult. Okay? You know in an election year that all campaign policies are going to be important. And so there's going to be very few policies put out in the next 6 months or so which are going to make a large majority of New Zealanders unhappy. Once a new government's decided, then they might start doing stuff. But let's be honest, a new government comes in, the first 6 months to a year is fighting over what we should do. The next year actually do stuff, and then you're back into election year all over again. And so you kind of get maybe 6 to 8 months of actual action, okay? It's very difficult to get things done. Developing personal skills, though, people are around all the time. We can measure their current skill level, we can measure what they can improve, we can measure where they should improve, all those sorts of things, and we can focus on them. That's only one part of the puzzle. There's an example of a recent ad from the American Heart Foundation. Very creative ad. It shows not a McDonald's fries packet, please. Not McDonald's. That would get us sued. But a fries packet full of bullets. Wow. Makes us think. Not really. I don't know if there's too many people out there who realize fries aren't bad for them. I think people know that. I think people know that it's bad for them. I don't know if they think it's going to kill them. I don't think it's going to kill me if I ate a chip. It's not going to blow up in my mouth. But there's this over-reliance that ends up on being creative ads to try and cut through the clutter to make you think, but does it actually change your behavior? Okay? There's a whole bunch of ads online which you can look at, which are very creative, amazingly powerful ads using great creativity, but they don't actually address the issue, and that's changing behavior. If you're not changing behavior, then I don't think your campaign has been successful. If you come up with a simple solution, something that's obvious, something that's tautological, but you know what, people's lives change for the better, then that's a successful solution. It doesn't have to be the most creative. There are issues, we're trying to cut through the clutter, blah, blah, blah. However, creativity just to develop personal skills is not good enough. I talk about this thing called this cone of irrelevance in my class. And the most important thing about this cone of irrelevance is that I Googled how to make the cone with the shading in Photoshop, and I made that myself. I'm very proud of that. I'll be happy to answer questions about the cone. On the y-axis, we've got audience reached. You know, you can see that where it is a wider cone, there are more people being reached. At a thinner cone, then there's fewer people reached. And along this side, you have messages that are more irrelevant and more relevant. And you have to find this balance between reaching a good number of people, but it's going to be irrelevant to a lot of those people because you end up with a wishy-washy little campaign that doesn't really fit anyone's direct needs. You can have a great customized campaign right down here, individual level, working with that person, very relevant to that person. Guess what? It's hard work working with people on individuals because it's a long slog. There's got to be some way that your health promotion, in whatever form it is, reaches both audience and relevancy, okay? And I'm going to try and talk about in the next maybe 20 minutes or so how we can improve the relevancy of your campaigns. With mass campaigns, there is naturally what this looks like a trickle-down effect or a trickle-across effect in this event, where you see a mass campaign down this side, and then when someone comes to talk to you at a more individual level, you would say, well, I've already seen that campaign and I've already made opinions of it. I already have had a debate about this. So we know that there are certain things that are good for us and bad for us, but we've already seen the ad about this, and when people talk to you on an individual level about that, you've already almost made up your mind about it. Does anybody remember the ACC campaigns that were run maybe about 7, 8 years ago, where it was trying to teach you about being careful around the house, and there was a lady showing her little muesli bars, and then she falls over and crashes through a table. And it's like, oh my goodness, that's crazy. Or a guy on a ladder painting his house, and then he falls off the ladder. The whole idea was to shock us into thinking that accidents can happen at any point. Every single conversation I had with people was like, wasn't that amazing? Did you see the lady crash through there? That was awesome. We didn't think for a second about the message. We just thought how great it was that we got shocked into it. You have this effect here. It doesn't have the desired effect down there. Lots of people talking about it. Awesome, great, goes viral, awesome. Doesn't change behavior on the individual level. The other example that we talk about a lot in class is the Legend ad that came out around the World Cup time, where the guy is having a problem in his head. Monique thinks you're dumb, and you know, if you get your mate to stop driving, then you're a legend. A lot of people were discussing that ad. A lot of people liked it. Use of humor, lightheartedness, trying to get a serious message across. And so we had a lot of people who found it relevant, you know, in a mass campaign. A lot of people found it racist, and they turned off completely. A lot of people found it an embarrassment because people are looking at this during the World Cup and thinking New Zealanders are a bunch of drunks. You know, that's not really what we want. A lot of people thought this would never happen. No one would ever speak up against their own mate because you would blah, 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 blah. Lots of debates were happening on this end. And then when it came down to actual discussions and individual action, a lot of people had already made up their mind. And that becomes difficult. I'm not saying everyone, but a lot of people had. I still think it's probably one of the better campaigns that's been run to discourage drink driving in New Zealand, but it still had its problems. So, where do we go from here? What do we do? How do we fix this? Let's pretend you have flown into a new country. Let's pretend you have just landed in a new country, you have hired a car, and you are driving down the highway. You do not know the speed limit. You have absolutely zero knowledge about what you're doing. You should have been more prepared, and someone should have told you, but you had not. Let's forget about it. You have no idea how fast you should be going, or indeed how fast everyone else should be going, what the penalties are, anything like that. How fast does one go? It's very difficult to work out what people do without little knowledge. Now, we assume that if you have knowledge, people will do the right thing, okay? So let's take that part out of the equation. We'll educate ourselves. Let's say we know that the speed limit on this road is 100 kilometers an hour. You have a car that tells you the speedo, you assume that's right, it is 100 kilometers an hour, and that's how fast you should go. What if everyone around you was doing 120? Do you still do 100 kilometers an hour? If the social norm, if everyone else around you in society is doing a little bit different, Do you still go 100? Some people might. They might go, yeah, I'll still do 100. If everyone's doing 80, do you still do 100? Usually not. People go, wow, if everyone else is doing 80, I'm clearly wrong. Slow down. It's a weird sort of... But let's say, everyone's doing 120, but you say, no, I'm going to stick at 100 because I know. You might also think about your past experience. Well, can I handle a car at 100 kilometers an hour? Am I able to control a vehicle doing 120? Do I think I can do that? If you have had bad experiences with driving at speed, you're probably less likely to go and drive at that fast speed, even if everybody else is doing it. Okay? Even if you know that, it's 100, everyone else is doing 120, if you've got bad experiences, you won't do it. If you've got good experiences with driving with speed, if you enjoy driving with speed, if that's the sort of thing you like to do and you've done it before, you might do 120. We know that we probably speed a lot more on the roads we know, to and from work, the paths we do a lot, than the actual new roads, the ones that we have less experience with. But let's say that's it. What about perceived consequences? What if you knew no one was watching? What if you knew there weren't cops around for miles around? You're in a country that has a very poorly funded police force. No one's around. No one's ever going to catch you. Would you stick at 100? Everyone else is doing 120. You know you can handle this car at 120. There are no cops around. Are you going to stick at 100 just because you know that's the right thing to do? Very difficult question to answer. Some people would, some people wouldn't. What about the environment? What about the stuff going on around you? The stuff you can't control. Is the road smooth? If the road's full of potholes, if you're out east side of town, you're not going to do 120, you're not even going to do 20 sometimes, okay? If the environment is not suited to driving at speed, it doesn't matter what the sign says, you are not going to drive at speed. So I went to see one of my friends out in Brighton yesterday, and I know the speed limit is 50 along those roads. I'm not even going to get close to that. I don't want to wreck my car, and I don't want to fall into the river, and there's all sorts of things, okay? I don't care what my knowledge is, I don't care what all the locals are doing, and I don't care how many times I've driven that road, or, there's not going to be any bad consequences because the cops aren't around to stop someone doing 40. I don't want to do it, okay? Because the environment is restricting me. And the last thing, what is my personal ability? What is my personal skill level? If I'm a racing driver, then I probably could hold the car at a higher level of speed. If I am someone who is experienced, I am probably able to go at that speed and it's okay. Or at least perceived personal ability is maybe a better thing to say. If you have the ability to hold the car at that speed, or a perceived ability to hold the car at that speed, more likely you are going to go at that speed because everyone else is doing that speed, there's no cops around, the roads are smooth, everything else fits to allowing you to go speed. All of those factors work together to change behavior, okay? All of those things work together to affect your behavior. If you're only focusing on one thing, and a lot of campaigns in New Zealand and internationally focus on this one thing of knowledge, then it ignores all this other stuff. Everything else gets put on the back burner, and we said, but you know what's good for you. You know you shouldn't be eating chips every day, all right? You know you shouldn't be going that fast on the road. You know you shouldn't be skipping that run, whatever it might be. If all you focus on is knowledge, you forget huge amounts of the equation. So what I want to do in the next few slides is go through examples of the research that I've done applying this little model that I've used and show you how I've tried to pick on little things and focus less on knowledge and more on the other parts. The problem with mass media campaigns is they say, we're going to try and do everything. We're going to try and increase your knowledge. We're going to try and increase your personal ability. We're going to try and tell you how the environment is bad for you, whatever it might be. And it becomes so cluttered and messy that the actual behavioral change message gets lost in amongst all that. So when you use a mass media campaign, when someone's got a limited budget, when they're told you've only got this much money, you need to affect as many people as possible, sometimes the actual message gets lost in amongst all that. I want to start with this example of a project I've been working on for a few years on encouraging kids to stop smoking or not start smoking in the first place, which is much better. And this all came about a project I started when I was working in the UK, and I was asked to come into a couple of high schools which had a bit of an issue with smoking. And if you've come to my previous lecture, I apologize. It's a similar example to that time. So the first thing I said to the principals, I said, I'd be more than happy to come in and help you with this smoking problem. When can I meet the kids? They're like, no, why would you want to talk to them? Just put some posters up and tell them to stop smoking. I'm like, no, it doesn't really work that way. I'd really like to chat with them. So had the police checks, get all that done and everything like that, and get a chance to meet with the kids and chat with them and assured them that what we talk about is between us. I'm not going to go tell your principal, blah, blah, blah. I know you guys are smoking. I can smell it. I'm not dumb, okay? So tell me what's going on. What drives you? What motivates you? We didn't even talk about smoking for the first half hour sometimes with these kids. Just what are you looking for out of life? And these are 13 to 16-year-olds. These are quite young kids, okay? And the things that affected them most was social norms and personal ability, okay? A little bit of environment, knowledge. They couldn't care less what people told them. 13-year-olds don't care what mum and dad think. They really don't. If anything, if mum and dad say this is right, they do the complete opposite. Perceived consequences, absolutely useless. Waste of time. You know what? If you smoke, you might die at 45 from lung cancer. 45, that's 4 or 5 times their age. They're not going to care about that. What a waste of time. What their friends thought of them, massively important. And one thing that was ignored a lot from the research was this idea of personal ability. They wanted to be treated like adults. They're in this transitional phase from child to adult. They're not quite adults. They definitely don't want to be treated like kids. So kids, you kind of tell them, this is what you should do, and this is what you're capable of doing. Go ahead and do it. Now, at 13 to 16, puberty's kicked in, hormones are flying, they want to be grown-ups. You have a lot of fights with your mum and dad because you're trying to find your own place in the family and things like that. And they wanted to be treated like adults, even though, if you got 13, I remember what it was like when I was 13. God, I wasn't even grown up enough to do anything, but I wanted to feel like it. So we talked a lot about them taking personal responsibility for their own actions. We told them what are ways that you can take personal responsibility. They wanted to be listened to. You asked them a question, they wanted their opinion to be heard and actually taken seriously. Little things like that. And even though they're 13 to 14, a lot of people were rolling their eyes at them. What do you know, kid? You have no idea. You wait until you're my age, blah, blah, blah. So my goal was to try and come up with a campaign to get kids to quit smoking without mentioning the health risks at all. Don't mention the health risks, because that's clearly not something they cared about. That perceived consequences was nothing. Drawing on their personal ability. You have the ability to do this, and making sure enough people around them agreed. That was the goal from this campaign. Now, one of the things that the kids talked about is that they don't like being taken for granted. They don't like being tricked. They don't like people thinking they're gullible, okay? So I put together a campaign which put up a whole bunch of things the tobacco industry tells people about cigarettes, okay? Put together an ad clip that we showed in class, and it was things like these tobacco executives saying, no, nicotine's not addictive, cool people smoke. One guy who used the great quote, which we put up there, is that it's true that women who smoke might end up with smaller babies, but some women might want smaller babies. I thought, that's fantastic. Oh, that was gold. That went straight into the video. And I said, look, these are all these people who think smoking is good for you, essentially. Now, granted, they're old clips, and there's a lot of people who've changed their mind about that. That doesn't matter to the kids. People were lying. And we finished with the tagline on this ad, every time you smoke, you're just believing their lies. Don't be that gullible, okay? And it killed smoking in the schools. They didn't want to be taken for granted. They didn't want to be seen as gullible, and they thought every time they're smoking, they're just being gullible. Now, the fact that they quit so quickly because they thought they didn't want to be seen as gullible was pretty gullible, let's be honest. But that is not an issue, okay? Because I was able to trick them into ways that I wanted them to do things, okay? So, all it took was understanding the people, developing a campaign that suited them. This is another one where we're looking at university students and binge drinking. Now, some people might argue, why are you stopping university students from binge drinking? This supports our economy, and it's part of being to university. But you know what? Maybe we should do some things that don't kill the kid's liver before they turn 23. Okay, that would be nice. I played beer pong for the first time a few weeks ago. I was amazing at beer pong. The main reason being is that Hugh did all the drinking for me. I was driving, so I made Hugh do all the drinking, and I was useless at it, even sober. But anyway, veer off track, like I said. So with university students, how do we try and get them to discourage binge drinking? Now, drinking perfectly happy with drinking responsibly. Binge drinking was slightly different. So after talking to the university students, knowledge was a big thing. You know, these are university students. They are there to learn. So they wanted to know the ins and outs. They wanted to know their limits. They wanted to know how that meant. Social norms, still a big thing. Some of the things that changed, though, with university students and the younger 13 to 16-year-olds, personal ability has dropped down a lot, which was an interesting one. We thought maybe they wanted to be adults. They wanted to make their own decisions. However, in their head, they're hearing all this other rhetoric that you're at university. Everything you thought you can do better. You can change. You can be anything you want. Just because you think you have been told X, Y, Z doesn't mean you can do much better than that. And they equated that to just because I have this ability doesn't mean I can actually control myself. So a lot of people we spoke to as well, they said, I love drinking and I wish I could stop, but once I've had 2, I might as well have 10. I just lose all personal ability once I get into it, okay? And I'm like, 10 in one night? 1 glass of wine and I'm old, clearly. But anyway, past experience as well. Whatever you did in the past doesn't matter. Because whatever happened in the past, they quickly forget. The 21st is a blur, especially with binge drinking, let's be fair. But they forget the past experiences very quickly and they carry on sometimes with the same behavior. Environment becomes important, so what's going on around them? You know, do you have good access to bars? We know in 2011 we lost a lot of students from this university. A lot of them went to other universities. Primarily, they said, not because there's anything wrong with the university, but the city was broken. There was nothing else for them to do outside of studies. We lost a bunch of students, 10, 15%, I think. However, my best students stayed. The ones who were there to learn stayed. I lost the tail at the end who bugged me and asked me what's in the test. I was quite happy. Let's get them, send them to Otago. I don't care. Okay. But the environment wasn't good for those students and they ended up leaving. Perfectly fine. So, how do we create a campaign of some sort that focuses on social norms, gets people to think about what is right and wrong, when what other people think. Minimizing personal ability, not thinking you can do this, you're a powerful individual, you are strong, they don't care, I don't care if I'm strong, I can be stronger, I don't care if I'm strong because after 2 beers I'm weak. And maximizing knowledge, focusing a lot on knowledge. So a couple of projects I've run, one with them, I ran with a former student of mine, Marcus Killian, and we looked at what we call social death. We looked at this idea that people are afraid of dying physically. It comes out of terror management theory, which is in the sociology literature. And we thought, well, rather than physically dying, which all the literature is based on, what about dying in a social situation? We all know that sometimes we embarrass ourselves and, oh, I feel like dying, okay, because my friends think I'm an idiot. So we turned it into that. We created an ad campaign which didn't focus on any health benefits or health risks associated with drinking. We didn't focus on anything about you can do this, you're an individual, you're powerful, or anything like that. We focused on if you end up blind drunk, passed out drunk, you ruin the night for all your friends and they're not going to ask you to come drinking with them next week. Guess what? Much more effective than if you drink too much, your liver might die in 20 years' time. Okay? University students don't care about the perceived consequences, physical perceived consequences. They care about the perceived consequences when it's society, when their social group around them is saying, this is not something we encourage or we want. And we know that if you've ever been to university or if you've been young, you know you always had that friend that ruined the night for you before you actually went drinking. They were already blind drunk at home before you went out. You don't want to be that guy, okay? And that's kind of how we pitched him. More recently, my master's student Sarah Pratt and I have been working on how to discourage binge drinking by using different contexts and different people in people's lives. So different people, social norms, and different contexts, changing the environment around them. So she went and tested a whole bunch of different ads which showed the person's mum saying, you know, control your drinking. I'm your mum, trust me, you should stop drinking. And then we changed it to the barman, saying, you know, I'm a barman, trust me, you've had enough. And we changed it to the best friend. I'm your best friend, trust me, you've had enough. And we changed the environment as well from a 21st versus someone just going out drinking on a Friday night. And looking at the different contexts, looking at the different people in their lives as well, we were able to show that there were certain times where people are more likely to be receptive. Guess what? If you tell someone on their 21st that they should stop drinking, they're not going to be happy with you, all right? So if you go, it doesn't matter if you're the barman, your mum, your best friend, no one's going to be liked, okay? And Sarah was a little upset by this. She's like, oh, where's the interaction effect? Where's the sexy data? And I said, this is sexy data. Because right now we can say, look, it doesn't matter. Once someone's drinking that much on a context, in an environment where drinking is encouraged, you've pretty much lost them. You need to be working much earlier on to stop this sort of thing. So you talk to someone the week beforehand and you say, it's your 21st next week and we're going to have a great time. We're going to have an awesome time. But you know what? I don't want you to be puking all of the next day. I don't want you to be ruining your life over this. I don't want you to make stupid decisions out of this, okay? So when you pick on different things, you're able to find out what's going to work best. The last example, a second to last example I want to talk about is this idea of food labels. Now, I know some of you are here specifically for this research, and I apologize because I'm only going to talk about it for like 3 minutes. The university was very excited about this, but I'm not so much because I'm, done, move on. And we looked at the way that food is labeled in New Zealand, and I did this with my other master student, Michelle Bouton, who's just completed, and she got an A, and I'm very proud of her. We got the examiner's reports back, so she's graduating in a couple of weeks' time. And she looked at how different labels on food affect people's choice of healthy or unhealthy foods. Now, New Zealand's got a fantastic reputation of being truthful on its foods. If you want to know the ingredients, they're on the packet. If you want to know how much dietary fiber is in there, on the packet. Everything like that. Okay, great that we have that transparency. I'm from India originally, okay, that sort of transparency does not exist on some of the foods, and even if there is a label, they sometimes lie, and who's going to check, okay? So we've got all this information. This is fantastic, great knowledge. Everyone after reading this is 100% educated on what's in food. Guess what? When we tested this, this was the absolute worst way to help people pick a healthy or unhealthy choice. A lot of the reason is, from the 80s onwards, there's been this stigma and fear against fat. If it's got fat in it, it's bad for you, do not get it. The problem is, when you take fat out, it tastes crap. So you fill sugar in to make it feel better, Let's stick lots of sugar in, and that makes the thing taste better. So it might be low in fat, but very high in sugar and carbohydrates, which is bad for you as well. So we got rid of this whole idea of the labels, and we tried a whole bunch of different labels. And so we did things like we tried the traffic light system, which is used. We tried the dietary intake, the daily intake version. So we said, here's the percentages. We even put a little tick on. In New Zealand, we've got the Heart Foundation tick and other sort of third-party endorsements. We created our own because we didn't want to be saying, oh, this is a Heart Foundation. So we created, I think we called it Healthy New Zealand or something like that. This has got the Healthy New Zealand tick. And we tested whether people were able to tell whether this was something that was good for them or bad for them. So the traffic light one, this is the healthy version with mostly green, a little bit of red. The unhealthy version is heaps of red and a little bit of yellow sort of thing. Very easy to tell. Now these ones on the end, which are a little harder to see, were really interesting, something that Michelle came up with. And it was translating the dietary information in that product into an exercise quotient. Now it's a very rough guide, but it was kind of like saying, if you eat this sandwich, it's going to take you 20 minutes of running to burn it off, okay? Or the unhealthy version, 45 minutes worth of running to burn it off. Now it's flawed because everyone is different, everyone runs differently, everyone's a different size, blah, blah, blah. But it was a very simplistic way of saying, this is how unhealthy or healthy this thing is. And it translated it into an exercise quotient. The other one is a brisk walk. So if you eat this, it's going to be an hour and 20 minutes of brisk walking to burn it off. Or it's going to be, I think the other one was 50 minutes of walking to burn it off for the healthier version, okay? And so we studied how we can manipulate all these things, not just looking at knowledge, at one part, but we're incorporating all these other things. The tick, social norms, okay? Social norms because other people have said that this is good, therefore I must think it's good. We're looking at the traffic light system. That's a good way of trying to show your personal ability. I am able to look at this and make sense of this. The same with the running one, personal ability. Can I actually run 20 minutes? How many people can run 20 minutes without stopping? I can, but I'm crying, vomiting. I stretch my calves a lot and pray to the God to take me now, But 20 minutes is a long time of continuous running, okay? That is a long time. A couple of marathon runners going, warm up, So people can look at it and go, I don't think I could even try that, or I think I can easily do that. It helps them to understand where it is, but it also puts in the perceived consequences associated with that as well. So if I have this donut, not only has it got 8 grams or probably close to 80 grams of saturated fat in this donut, but it's actually a 3-hour run in this donut. That's a long run. And that increases the perceived consequences very, very quickly. So what do we find from this? Very briefly, we surveyed about 600 people as part of this study, and we showed them each one of these things, one of these packets, the healthy version or the unhealthy version, and we also measured against their health literacy. So whether they knew a lot about health and what was good for them, and whether they knew or they didn't know so much about their health and what was bad for them. First finding straight up, the standard nutritional label that you see on food was the absolute worst. It doesn't matter if you were high health literacy or low health literacy. It was the worst way of people deciding whether this was good for them or bad for them. Everything else was better. Straight away, we know that the current system is flawed. Now, the ones that worked really well with the traffic light system worked pretty well because it's visual. Now, it worked really well, especially for the people who had a lower health literacy, people who didn't know what saturated fats were and how they were different from sugars or carbs or whatever it might be. Okay? People with high health literacy knew, but what it did do, it made it easier for them to understand. It made it quicker for them to make a decision. So it was still much, much better. The running one did not work so well. The running one didn't work so well. It worked pretty well, but it didn't work as well as the walking one. And we were kind of a bit confused like this. We thought, why would the running one not work so well, but the walking one worked? The thing we came up with, the reason we came up with is that everyone just walks. Pretty much everyone walks. Not everyone runs. So translating something into a run, someone goes, oh, that's a 40-minute run. It's a 40-minute run, I could do that. Until they try running for 40 minutes, okay? And then you think, well, I don't think I could do that. Walking for an hour, everyone knows what walking for an hour is. It's tiring work, you know? Running for 40 minutes, people maybe are not so aware. So the walking one tended to work well again, especially for people with a low health literacy. Now, one of the things we found from this study as well is that generally people in New Zealand have really bad health literacy. They think they have great health literacy. They know what is right for them. They know fat is bad and they know carbs are bad and blah, blah, blah. When we actually tested them, they sucked. They failed, okay? So when we actually gave them some questions, so what is the answer to this when it comes to healthy eating? What's the answer to this? To exercise. A lot of them were quite bad. So there's already this perceived overconfidence about what is right for us and what's good for us in New Zealand. But secondly, when we use the labels, they were actually quite a poor way of trying to encourage people to make healthy choices. I want to finish with this one. And this is a study that I'm very passionate about and working on at the moment. And it's trying to break the stigma associated with mental health. Now, specifically, I'm looking at depression and bipolar in this case. Not looking so much at some of the other mental health issues, but depression, especially within Christchurch, is one of those things that is kind of simmering away. Everyone's feeling a little bit angsty at little times, and the All Right campaign is doing a great job to try and encourage people to chat more about this sort of stuff. One of the problems with mental health, and especially depression, is that everything you feel minimizes when you start thinking about it. I have no personal ability. I have no ability to change this myself. I have tried to do this in the past, and I can't do it. I cannot tell anyone because people are going to think I'm an idiot because I'm not able to break out of this myself, so I can't tell anyone. The environment in New Zealand, as much as we want it to be conscious and very positive around mental health, there's still a very strong stigma around mental health. So people don't feel they can open up. The perceived consequences, God, I'm working mainly with men, and the hardest thing they find is not to say, I love you to their wife, but I need help. Actually, for a man to go to their loved one and say, I can't do this, I need help, is extremely difficult for men in New Zealand. There's this blokey sort of attitude, which means you cannot be out of control. You cannot be weak. You cannot feel like you cannot do this yourself. And telling your wife about this is the worst thing you can do because you're not going to feel like a man, okay? So this perceived consequences are high, and then the knowledge associated with this is very low as well. The actual knowledge associated with mental health in New Zealand tends to be pretty low. People think depression is just people who are sad for a long time. Oh, I wish it was that case. I wish people were just sad for a long time. The example I use, I was diagnosed with depression at a very young age, and so I've lived longer in my life with clinical depression than without it, which is quite depressing in itself. But I was fortunate enough to win an award about a year ago, I think. And I got the letter on my desk, and I was typing away. I opened it. You've won this very prestigious award. I looked at it and put it to the side and carried on working. It meant absolutely nothing to me. I had no joy in this. I had no sadness in this. Just complete numbness because I was so deep in it at the time. Depression is not about being sad because something bad has happened in your life. That's sadness, okay? If your mum dies, it's okay to be sad. That's grief. It's when everything is going right and you still don't feel anything, that you know something is wrong. And a lot of people don't get that. And that's why a lot of people find it difficult to talk about issues with mental health, because the knowledge isn't there, the perceived consequences are high, the social norms are all out of whack, blah, 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 blah. So how do we overcome this? Well, some of the ways I'm working on is trying to redress some of these things. So you can't go out there and say, you know, hey, we're going to change the culture and we're going to change social norms. Okay? It'd be very, very good if we could. And John Cohen's doing a great job with this. I won't deny that. He's doing a fantastic job to try and redress social norms. But for the average person, it's still very difficult. What we can do, though, is say, I don't care what you think other people will say. I'm going to tell you what I think. And that is, if you need my help, I will support you. I will not think you're a dick. I will not harass you. I will not tease you. I will try and show you that I am able to help you. The social norms are there, that they feel they can talk to that person. You can go up to them and you can say, you know, I know it didn't work in the past. I know it's always been bad in the past. And I know that maybe in the past even you try to get out of this yourself. But maybe this is not a time that this is going to work. Maybe this is not a time that you're able to do this on your own. So maybe this is a time that we try something different. We try and avoid the past experiences and we try to go and see a professional, or we try to get someone to talk to you. And the environment. Big thing in mental health is the environment sometimes, because it's very easy to stay in your bed all day and just forget about it. Like, you know what, I'm comfortable in my bed. I don't really want to go outside and see people. People suck. Quite happy in my bed. Perceived consequences out there. I want to stay in my environment. So sometimes just grabbing someone and changing their environment makes a big difference, okay? It's a horrible experience trying to work with someone to change their environment, to get them out of their cocoon. But sometimes by changing that, you can start to redress the balance. If you just focused on knowledge, it's a clinical thing. See a doctor, you'll be fixed. Doesn't change, okay? Telling people that, and people should know that, not everyone does. People should know that doesn't mean they're actually going to change the behavior. Sometimes we've got to tick off these other things as well. A lot of the work I do with men suffering from mental health is looking at how they change their environment and they don't interact with people in a real world setting. They can't tell their wife, they can't tell their girlfriend, they can't tell their kids, they definitely can't tell their boss. But they can go online in an anonymous forum and type about their experiences because they just want to be heard. They just want people to know what they're going through. Okay? And so there's a lot of forums online, a lot of places online where you can change the environment, where the perceived consequences are low because you're anonymous and someone says something stupid, then you can at least forget about it, delete it. It's not your wife or your father or your boss or anything like that. You can change the social norms because you can find forums which are specifically suited to supporting you in your struggle. Okay? And so you know it's a supportive environment and there's no fear of doing that. But trying to get those men to then talk about their issues outside of that situation, because you know what? There aren't clinical psychologists online. There aren't people who can help them, and sometimes there are people who are actually going to hurt them online as well. Getting them to open up and say, I'm willing to now do this offline is the biggest struggle in going forward. So, how do you make better health promotions? To kind of sum things up. And know your target audience better than you know themselves. Get inside their head, talk to them, see what motivates them, see what really drives them. Don't be hindered by your existing knowledge of what you think they should be doing and what you think works for them. Actually talk to them. It's the hardest part. I know people suck, like I say, but talk to them. And some of them are okay. Don't look to only build knowledge. Knowledge is just one part. Sometimes it is a driver for the other factors. You know, if you can build knowledge, then maybe it can filter into the other things, but don't just leave it at that, okay? An over-reliance on mass media promotions can have a trickle-down effect. If all we do are these big promotions saying, this is what you can do, that can get inside someone's head and they can debate with this online or with their friends. And by the time you actually get to work with them one-on-one, they've made a decision already of what they want to do and what they might not want to do. Relying that you have made the right message and it's got through to them is a risky process. Measure success by the amount of behavioral change. Whoops. I love it that people measure knowledge, and I love it that people measure attitudes, and I love it that people measure all these other things, but if behavior hasn't changed, then it hasn't been a success. We've got to see people's lives change, and we've got to see them actually go out and do it. Intentions just aren't good enough, okay? And the final thing, don't be tempted to sacrifice relevance for reach, okay? Make your messages as relevant as possible. If you know you can reach a target audience that is larger, but it means sacrificing relevance, then don't do it. I started life as a target marketer, so I'm passionate about making sure that the right message goes to the right people. So maybe you need a message for kids in school from the age of 13 to 16 in this suburb, and then you need to talk to other kids in another suburb because they will be motivated differently. Okay? It's a lot more work, and your money won't go as far, but at least you'll see behavior change. It is much more abusive in my mind if we spent $20 million on a campaign which made no change at all, when we could have split that up, maybe reached fewer people, but at least their lives would have been better. That's all I really want to say, and I really want to open up to questions. Oh, that was long, I apologize. Thank you.